It doesn't matter about what codec or compression or what light temperature we're using. If the person can't talk that you're interviewing because they feel intimidated or feel nervous, then you're not going to get an interview. It doesn't matter what the cameras are doing.
I wanted to ask you, you've been all over the world, right? What gave you that opportunity to travel?
Good question. I like adventure travel before I like making film. Okay, so film has given me, or documentary rather, has given me the vehicle to feed my addiction for adventure travel.
Mm-hmm.
So adventure travel in general is quite expensive. And I soon realised that if you can find a way of earning money through your hobby, right, that's going to be a good thing. So primarily the quest for travelling and being in interesting places is the vehicle for me then to make film.
Okay.
Not the other way around. Not the other way around. So I'm an adventure traveller before I'm actually a filmmaker. But that said, I've done a lot of filmmaking during my adventure travels.
Right.
I mean, we're talking thousands of individual productions. So nonetheless, I am a filmmaker. But it's adventure travel that drives that first.
And what do you think you would be doing if it wasn't for film?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually am quite into geology. So I did a degree in geology, and that degree in geology was again driven by working in Iceland, and I was very curious about the natural features that I saw around me, and I sort of wondered how does all this happen? So I studied geology, but I'm not academic, I'm dyslexic. And so I soon decided that doing a degree in geology was too much work. There was too much academic side to it. Whereas I liked being out there, sort of exploring rather than sat in a classroom reading or writing a report.
Mm-hmm.
So geology, I say I'd be a geologist, but I probably wouldn't because it's too academic. So I think if I wasn't a filmmaker, I'd probably concentrate into photography. So I would then go into photography, which is pretty much the same kind of thing. It's storytelling with one picture versus a series of pictures. But it's in essence it's a creative industry.
And when you talk about adventure traveling, can you explain what that is? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so traveling could be getting on a bus coming here. Traveling could be going to a capital city. It could be going on a 2-week beach holiday. That's traveling. But adventure traveling is going off the trail, is going to places that tourists don't necessarily go to. I remember once working on a production, working in North India. We were filming in this very remote monastery, and with all these monks, wearing their robes, and then sort of being very humble. There was no electricity, it was very, very basic. And then one of the monk's robes sort of fell to the side, and under his robe was a David Beckham football t-shirt, and that made me laugh. That I'd gone so far off the beaten trail in quest of adventure travel, and yet there were still David Beckham relics lying around me in the way that monks were wearing these t-shirts. If that makes sense. But yeah, adventure travel is in essence going off the beaten trail.
Okay. I took some geology classes too when I was in college, and that's not an easy course.
No.
That is a difficult course to take. Yeah, so I can imagine that filmmaking would be a easier way to get into that area of feeling your need of traveling and doing adventures and such, especially documentary filmmaking. Was there anything that you saw, a film or anything that inspired you to decide to let's try the film route? Was that in school or was that?
Well, no, 100%. I mean, I've told this quite a few times in various sort of guises. It was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that got me into adventure travel, right? I'd be 14, 15, I think, when that came out. Because Raiders came out in 1982 and Temple of Doom came out in 84. So I was still at school when I saw that film and I wanted to be Indiana Jones, period.
Yeah.
But how does a 14-year-old living in East London become Indiana Jones? So what I decided to do was make a remake of Temple of Doom, okay, in my garden and in a local forest. And I conscripted a load of my school friends and I bought a book called How to Make Films. That's what this was called. I bought the book and I read the book and I discovered you needed things like props and you needed things like costumes and scripts and cameras and tripods, which I knew nothing about. I was only 14. And then my mum bought me an 8mm film camera, which was £50 in, which was quite a lot. I stuck that on a tripod. Like I said, conscripted all my friends, got them to contribute towards the budget, and created a whole dossier, which is basically a treatment, which I still have actually, and made this Temple of Doom. I played Indiana Jones, of course, and I also was the producer, director, cameraman, and everything else with it alongside. And it was that I soon realised that if I actually wanted to go on adventure travels, it was a mechanism of making film that would allow me to do that. So film had allowed me to become an Indiana Jones, and it was film that was then this avenue that I was pursuing, so I could then basically fulfil my thirst for adventure travel.
Nice. But that was fiction.
Right.
That was fiction. I hadn't woken up into the world of documentary yet. That was later.
And what was that film that you saw that gave you that insight? Hey, this is a possibility.
No, it was Temple of Doom.
No, I mean documentary-wise.
Oh.
Nonfiction.
I don't know, actually. There wasn't a particular factual documentary that inspired me as a late teenager, early 20s. It was that when I went to film school, I soon realised that actually to really fulfil adventure travel, fiction isn't that route, because you're a cog in a very large wheel. You're on a sound stage. You're perhaps on a location with 30, 40 other people, with catering trucks and lighting trucks and all that stuff. And yeah, you might be making a film in the Amazon jungle, but actually there's like 100 people around you, and then you're staying in a hotel, and then you've got this, like I say, this catering truck. That wasn't adventure travel. That wasn't really what I was looking for. I was looking for something that actually, in a way, was like an Indiana Jones character, where you were pretty much self-sufficient, albeit perhaps working in a team of, say, 3 or 4, perhaps. But you were on your own in that location as a filmmaker, without the backup of the Hollywood mechanism looking after you.
Okay, and what can you remember from your school, your film school? Did you go to a film school, or did you just went to a film school?
Yeah.
What school was that?
I was a National Film and Television School.
Okay. And what was the most memorable part of school?
I think the level of the expertise of the people that came to the school. So, for example, people that then went on to make films like Gandhi, you know, award-winning BAFTA DOPs, BAFTA directors. Ridley Scott was one of the many guest lecturers available. Oh, wow. So that level of expertise.
So people from the industry were giving you lessons, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, and people at the top of their game, and also actors, people like Roger Moore. You know, so you would have the ability to work with high-end professionals that have gone on, you know, perhaps not at that point in their career, but well, that had gone on to produce and make major Oscar-winning, BAFTA-winning films. Nice. So that kind of pool was something that was available.
The school's in London, or where's the school based?
West London.
West London.
Beaconsfield.
And London is full of film studios, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
like a
Yeah, well, you got Pinewood, not that far.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
with the
right.
007 stage.
yeah. And was there any famous documentary filmmakers that went to your school that you learned a lot from, or like where'd you learn your skills?
No, because I wasn't necessarily interested in making documentary there. So again, I went down the fiction route, but decided that actually that wasn't going to be the route that I wanted to take.
Oh, so you decided after you finished
Yeah,
school?
so I quit. I never finished the
okay.
course.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. You know, for me, I mean, I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but for me, film isn't an academic course. There's only so many essays that you can write about it. There's so many films that you can analyse. I mean, I did A-level film studies at a local tech college, and that was stripping down the narrative of a film. And that's great, and I learned a lot. I remember watching Blade Runner something like 10 times, literally breaking down shot by shot. And a film by Orson Welles, can't remember what it was called, but it was a black and white, and a lot of Hitchcock as well, stripping down Hitchcock films. And that was great. It was a great learning curve, but obviously I'm not an academic. I'm far more a creative person, and being trapped into that world, again, coming from the initial thirst to explore in the adventure travel world, that wasn't doing essays,
Right.
wasn't really ticking my box. So I quit. I got an internship at the BBC, which was far more rewarding than necessarily writing. I mean, this is obviously pre-laptop as well.
Right.
So writing essays by hand wasn't something that was driving me.
And so you got an internship at BBC, and what department were you working for?
It wasn't a department. It was with two cameramen that took me under their wing, and they just basically, it was like an internship, basically. And then we worked on various productions together.
And that was fiction and nonfiction, or
Purely documentary.
purely documentary?
Purely documentary.
And so you would travel with them as well? Did they travel outside of London to?
Yeah. We made some films locally in London, and then various productions would come along, and basically you're a camera assistant / runner / do everything. But it was, and they were the days when you actually needed a union card to work in the industry. So it was a routine to get your union card. You know, you had to be in the club, and to do that you had to have work, but you couldn't get work unless you were in the club.
Right.
And so that was a way of actually getting work. Through being trained by professional cameramen. I don't remember their names. I mean, this was a long time ago, but there were two cameramen that somehow I'd met, and they sort of gave me that opportunity.
Wow.
And that's the route that I pursued, rather than the academic route of studying film per se. It was basically start from the bottom up, literally, you know,
like an apprenticeship, basically.
carrying tripods and stuff.
Right. And where did you guys go that for you was the first time you felt like I'm scratching my itch for traveling and
I think
and
the
adventure?
first, again, I was thinking, because I thought you might ask it, I was trying to think of the name of the production, but one of the first gigs I ever did was actually in Palestine. And that was basically all the tunnels that are in Palestine. And that was a documentary we did about that.
Was that was late 80s, 90s?
That would have been early 90s. Early 90s. Probably 92, 93, I'm guessing. So that was my first real opportunity to travel outside of the UK with a camera in my hand.
Wow.
Telling that story. And then what happened was that all other productions started to just roll, and then you just get another little job, mostly within the BBC, but also then working as freelance.
Right. And you were working as a camera person, or were you doing different functions?
No,
besides
totally
camera?
as a cameraman.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're working
Totally.
with a team.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
big is a team typically?
Good question. For broadcast documentary, a team is somewhere in the region, on location is somewhere in the region between 4 and 6 people.
Okay.
6 would be quite large.
Right.
6 would be quite large. 4 is probably the norm. So director, sound, camera, and normally we call them researchers. So basically someone doing the general sort of admin of a shoot,
Right.
running the shoot. So normally a team of 4. And the director might be a shooting director anyway.
As well.
Yeah.
And would you be working also with local filmmakers there too? Like
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you would always have a fixer or a local producer. So you'd always, the idea of traveling to, let's just pick a random country, Rwanda. The idea of going to Rwanda by yourself as a film crew and wandering around Rwanda with your cameras just doesn't happen. You need a local producer that will arrange your transportation, will arrange your security, will arrange your logistics, will act as a translator, will hire a driver. And so basically you have those negotiations before you go into country. And then that is all in the range with them. And they are credited as a local producer.
How do you find people like that? Like if you're just starting from, let's say, you're saying from London and you do want to
Well, in
go
the 90s, that was quite difficult.
Right.
I mean,
internet wasn't so big at that point.
Well, I mean, nowadays, I mean, you could go on Facebook and you could find, fixers and arrangers that way, and obviously through LinkedIn and that. But in those days, I'm not actually too sure. I mean, obviously we did. So there were ways. I mean, a lot of it was word of mouth. So, I mean, there are many creative forums. I mean, for example, I'm a member of the Guild of Camera Professionals, and that's been running for, I think, 50 years. So they would have had a network of people that have worked with a fixer. And if I said to you, Patrick, oh, do you know anyone in Rwanda? Oh, yeah, I know someone. Yeah,
right.
Let me give you his.
So word
let
of
me
mouth.
give you his. I'm not sure. I don't think if an email was then. I think.
Fax machines.
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been a landline number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just call them up, hope they answer, hope they're not on a job.
Do those people also get credited on films
Oh,
as well?
100%.
So sometimes you might look at the end of the film and see who worked on the film to see I might need the same kind of crew.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in the documentary world, they're credited as local producers.
Right.
Or fixer, but mostly local producers.
Okay. And so you worked as a cinematographer.
Yeah, cinematographer is a big word.
You would say just camera person.
Yeah, cinematographer for me, anyone especially that's pretty new in their career that calls themselves a director of photography is a bit of a self-inflated title.
Okay.
For me, direct photography is definitely in the world of fiction.
Okay. At what point did you branch to other functions like director, editor, or did you stay within?
Yeah, I think actually, and I say this to a lot of people, I think that if you want to be a director, you have to start off as a camera operator first. Really.
For both fiction and documentary, or just for?
I can only really talk for documentary.
Right.
I can only really talk for documentary. Because to be a director, the primary role of a director is to have people skills. If you can't get your talent or your contributor to open up, you're a useless director. It doesn't matter what you know about cameras, what you know about scripts, what you know about editing. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to communicate with people that may not want to tell you a story. They may be nervous, there may be cultural or religious reasons why they don't want to open up. And so as a director, you've got to be able to put people at ease before you hit the record button. And as a cameraman that had worked on so many different gigs with so many directors, I'd worked with some very good directors and I worked with very bad directors. And gradually, as a cameraman, as a camera operator, you begin to realize that it's all about building relationships with those around you. And therefore it's a natural progression to then so for example, so quite often there'd be a shoot, there'd be an interview, and the director would ream off all his pre-written questions. And I, as the cameraman, was sort of, sorry, I just want to unpack that. When you were saying about that, what did you really mean by that? And the director sat there going, oh, the cameraman's asking a question. Mm-hmm. And then the person, being interviewed, the contributor, would start to open up a whole world that the director hadn't explored. And I soon realised I was actually quite good at asking questions. I think because I'm quite nosy. So, and I'm quite good at putting people at ease in an interview, and getting them to kind of open up. And that's when I soon realized that actually being a cameraman and a director is quite useful. And then, of course, you then go down the world of being a shooting director, where you are pretty much able to then go by yourself, without, a sound man or an assistant, and just go out and make films by yourself. So the route for me to become a director was quite a logical route, quite an easy route, because again, I'm quite curious and I like asking questions.
Right. So, being behind the camera, you also tend to, of course, have to ask the person that you're interviewing or you're shooting questions as well, right? To move here or do this or that,
Yeah.
and that already gives you a bit of connection with the person that you're
Yeah, definitely.
shooting.
Yeah.
And then from there, it grew into also watching how the director works with the person
Yeah.
and taking some skills from there and then applying it little by little
Yeah.
when you had an opportunity yourself.
Yeah,
to,
definitely. And also setups. I mean, here we are today doing a podcast. And
Right.
we've got 3 cameras set up with lights and microphones. But if I was here talking about a traumatic incident that happened to me, this might put me off. Okay, if I've got to open up my heart to something that happened to me. So if the crew are there, if the crew are very empathetic and are able to put the contributor at ease, that is a big part of the storytelling. It doesn't
Right.
matter about what codec or compression or what light temperature we're using. If the person can't talk that you're interviewing because they feel intimidated or feel nervous, then you're not going to get an interview. It doesn't matter what the cameras are doing.
So it's important to have the entire crew with the same mindset
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
being curious, of being understanding
Yeah.
with their subject matter.
I mean, I've interviewed some very vulnerable people, very vulnerable, or not only vulnerable, but perhaps malicious, evil, narcissistic, all kinds of people. And so you've got to be able to navigate that as a director.
So just because someone is willing to be in front of a camera does not mean you yet have what you need.
No.
You still have to be able to.
Yeah, you've got to get it out of them.
You're right.
You've got to get it out of them.
And do you think it's easier to film people in their where they're from and in their habitat and in their own surroundings, or because we've seen documentaries where you've seen an interview, but then the person's like in a studio or so.
Yeah.
So they brought them in for an
Yeah.
interview. What do you think is easier to film people at home or?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I suppose it depends on what their backstory is and on why they're being interviewed. I mean, they might like it coming to like a disused warehouse with, sort of load of industrial machines in the background and multi-camera setup. They might like that, and in fact, taking them out of their natural world might actually add for a better interview, rather than in their own house. They might be less open to opening up in their own house, depending what the subject is. I mean, documentary is so vast.
Right.
I mean, how many stories are there on the planet that you can tell? How many different angles and could you explore?
And the documentaries that you've done, have they been mostly on location, or have you also done some setup documentaries where it's like a little bit of fiction, like a retelling of a story, or?
Yeah, I mean, all of the content that I've done, I think I've only ever shot 2 fiction films in my life, I think. And even
Full fiction films.
Well, they're more fiction assignments. The whole narrative was fiction. So,
Right.
But obviously documentaries, hundreds. And then obviously sometimes within those documentaries, you've got holes in your narrative. Things that have happened in the past.
Right.
How are you going to tell that? Are you going to leave it to the audience's imagination, or are you somehow going to bring that to life? And there are many tools that you can adopt. You could use some kind of sort of animation, but obviously that's expensive, or you could somehow reconstruct that in some way, shape, or form. So that's where documentary does bleed into fiction, because then you might be working with actors, you might be working with the prop department, you might be working with with a location that needs to be dressed, or you might need all those kind of things, costumes. So there's where the genres do blend.
Mm-hmm.
And so using drama reconstruction, I mean, it could be a simple thing, isn't it? It could be just a shot of you taking a sip of water. It doesn't have to be a whole sort of reenactment of your entire life, but it could be something simple that just illustrates something that happened in the past.
And have you done those type of documentaries?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you feel about that in terms of like who's responsible for shooting that part? The same crew, or is it a different
It depends on the budget.
Depends on the budget.
It really depends on the budget. It depends how
much
big the
money.
production.
Right.
Yeah. I think if you start in working with actors and then sort of, there was one production, I won't go into too much details, but we were staging a car crash. Now, that needed stunt doubles. That needed stunt drivers. That needed a whole first aid team. That's a higher level of drama reconstruction. But it could also be simply where even it could be my own fingers typing something on a keyboard and I'm pretending I'm someone else. That is drama reconstruction.
Yeah.
It could be the contributors talking about when they sent that email cut to someone typing on keyboard. That in a way is drama reconstruction. And so it purely depends on the budget.
Now you like adventure and going to places that you would, for some people, be quite extreme in terms of like being dangerous and a lot of unknowns. Some people like to have controlled environments, right? That they can know where McDonald's is when they need to go to McDonald's or find a bathroom. Is there anything out there that scares you that you say, no, I would not go there. I don't want to go there. Or like maybe some particular animal that you don't want to ever come across, or an environment that is way too dangerous. And
well, I teach hostile environment training. So more filmmakers per year are killed or seriously injured than firefighters globally. And people go, well, how is that possible? When you think about a firefighter, they don't run into a burning building without the proper training, the proper clothing and protocol. Filmmakers, on the other hand, will travel the world and put themselves in situations, go off the beaten track that they're perhaps not that familiar with. They're not trained. They don't have the right clothing, the right equipment, and they put themselves in risk. And when I talk about hostile environment training, I divide it into two aspects. I talk about the natural world and the human world. Now, the natural world is very easy to manage. Cold is cold, hot is hot, wet is wet. A tiger is a tiger and a shark is a shark. Now, will that tiger bite you? Possibly. Will it not? Possibly. But that's very easy to manage. Yeah. If you're filming an active volcano, and I was making a film about Stromboli in Italy a few years ago, there's a chance that volcano might erupt, but then it might not. So you take the necessary precautions. And those natural world environments are very easy to manage. I mean, I made a film on Mount Everest. It's high. There's no surprises. The problems is human, right? Political situations change, economic situations change. You can't plan the human factor in the same way that you can plan the natural factor. You could go to places like Mogadishu and have a perfectly safe and an enjoyable experience and have no trouble whatsoever. Or you could go to Amsterdam and end up being attacked or robbed. So you can't plan for that. It's the human factor that as a filmmaker you cannot predict. So as a filmmaker, I don't work in war zones, period. I'm not a war journalist, and I never have done. But I've worked in areas that are considered conflict zones, areas that are considered unsafe, areas that governments advise you not to go to at all, considered red zones. But even then, it's just about having the right mental attitude when you arrive and not being stupid as well, taking advice from local people. Because if local people are living and working there, then you can, under their wing to a certain extent. Obviously, the political situations are changing so much. I mean, Gaza. I mean, you can't go there as a filmmaker. I'm going to go to Gaza and make a film. It's not going to happen, But generally, when you're working with people and working with locals, then you're going to be pretty much, safe. If that answers your question.
Well, I was wondering if there's any places that you say frightens you.
Frightens me?
Yeah. Have you been to any place that has frightened you, I would say?
No.
So the whole world's open for you, basically. Besides the war zones,
Yeah.
You'd go anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not worried about leeches or
Oh, no.
vampire bats?
No, not at all.
Those type of things? Okay.
No.
Have you ever experienced any type of adverse effects from traveling anywhere in terms of like catching an illness that puts you out for months or so? Or,
No. I mean, I've only ever really been sick about 2 or 3 times, and that's food poisoning, and that's when actually staying in quite good hotels at the buffet. Little kids eating hand to mouth and putting food back at the buffet, and they've got a stomach bug. And yet I've eaten loads of street food all over the world. I mean, I'm a vegetarian, that helps. So that eliminates things like seafood and raw meat and chicken and all that stuff. So that generally, that gets rid of that naturally. But no, I've only ever been sick 2 or 3 times. And again, that was in good hotels.
Wow.
In South Africa, Bolivia, and somewhere else. I can't remember.
In terms of the places that you've been, is there any place that you really look forward to going to again? From because where haven't you been yet? Let's start there. Where haven't you been yet that you still want to go and make a film?
I like dots on the map. So I like remote islands. I like feeling that it takes you 3 or 4 days just to get there. And I'm trying to think of the name of the island. So you've got Scotland, and then you've got 2 groups of islands called the Orkney and the Shetland Islands. They're north of Scotland, and they're closer to the Arctic Circle than they are to London, but they're still part of Scotland. Then you've got Shetland, and then you've got this little island off of Shetland, and I cannot remember its name, but it is the smallest inhabited island in the UK, right? I think it's like sort of 50 people live there. But to get there is at least a 2-day journey because it's not a direct flight. You have to get little aircraft just to get there from London.
Right.
So although it might not be that exotic and I'm not sort of saying somewhere like Easter Island or somewhere like that, the fact that I'm wondering, what do people do on an island where there's 50 people living on it?
Yeah.
That is closer to the Arctic Circle than it is to London, but it's part of the UK. So it's those places that I'm most intrigued on.
The real remote places with some civilization. And if you wanted to make a documentary there.
Well, I'm going to.
So how would you approach that? Would you first visit the island, stay with people there and get to know them, and then come back with a crew? Or would you go with some equipment already and just start filming whenever you got a chance?
It really depends on budgets, and I mean, it's a big subject to talk about, but I no longer work for broadcast per se, unless they contacted me. I'm done with contacting TV channels because for me, that's a thankless process of sending hundreds of emails. So long gone have the days where I would spend 2 years developing an idea for the BBC for them to eventually say no. And then my whole dream of then going to this little island off the Shetland Islands is gone. I'd come up with another idea and try and develop that idea. But what I try and do now is that all of my work is for YouTube. And what I would do now is I would contact, for example, Shetland Tourism Board and say, I'd love to make a film. It's for YouTube, but don't let that fool you because I've got 30 years of broadcast experience. That's a proper documentary. Could you throw like £5,000 on the table? And then I'd go there with that very small budget rather than going to the BBC or National Geographic. We need 200,000 to make a documentary, because that's the kind of budget you'd be talking about, and go through the whole process for them to say no. So all of the ideas that I come up with for my YouTube channel are achievable within a micro budget. And so some of the projects I've got lined up are quite far flung and quite remote, but they're accessible. So I'm talking to a chap who runs the ultimate escapism holiday. It's basically living on a desert island for 2 weeks alone. So real castaway. They give you training and then they leave you there for 2 weeks alone, right? So we're talking about ideas where we can collaborate, where I go and live on a desert island by myself for 2 weeks and make a film about it. I mean, you've really got nothing. You've literally got a machete, and that's about it. You know, but that project is kind of funded through me using my skills as a producer to get these companies on board. So I spend a lot of time going to these travel events and shows and conferences and talking to different companies and getting micro budgets to make my productions happen, versus spending hundreds of hours, without exaggeration, writing a 2-pager, writing a treatment, doing a budget, even creating basically a teaser. Teasers are very hard to make. You're basically making your film without having made your film.
Right.
Go and make a teaser, go and make a pilot. Yeah, I'll go and do that. And spend 6 months making a pilot for you to say no.
No guarantee.
No guarantee. No guarantee at all. No. In the old days, you'd get some kind of budget to go and make your teaser, but not anymore.
Oh, they expect you to do it yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Self-finance.
All the teasers that I've been asked to deliver have all been self-funded. And we're talking foreign shoots as well.
Wow.
We're talking foreign shoots. If you think you're that close to getting a series off the ground, a documentary series,
you'll take the risk.
You'll take the risk.
Right.
You'll fly to X, Y, and Z and meet up with X, Y, and Z, your contributor, and try and tell their story. Of course you will. What are you going to say to National Geographic or Netflix? No.
Right. But I guess at some point there is so many risks you can take before you say,
yeah,
it's not viable anymore.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, COVID for me was the full stop. COVID for me was the full stop. And it was a reset mechanism for me. Because there was a couple of weeks when COVID really happened, didn't it? At the start. I had 3, I won't go into the details, but I had 3 big productions and they all collapsed within 1 or 2 weeks. With the total budget collapse of about $2 million.
Wow.
So we're talking quite big productions that they all literally just ended, period. And of course, never started again. How could they? And so at that point, I had, premises. I was collaborating with people. I was employing people. And at that point, that all ended and left me sort of sit there scratching my head going, what am I going to do? How am I going to make any money? All of my work is adventure travel based, or at least travel. Might not have adventure, but it's certainly travel based. What am I going to do? And it was that kind of then really forced me to think closely about how could I duck and dive in a post-COVID era? How could I continue what I'm doing on micro budgets?
Mm-hmm.
And then I literally had this eureka moment in the shower where I thought, wait a minute, YouTube. Because up until that point, I thought YouTube was a bit of a joke. I thought, well, you can't call yourself a filmmaker and put stuff on YouTube because anyone can do that. And to a certain extent, anyone can. For me, success was National Geographic, was Discovery, was BBC. That was success, not YouTube. So it was a real good slap in my own face when I actually realised, well, hang on a minute. No, YouTube is something that is credible as a filmmaker, provided that you are honest to your own standards and you create meaningful content, and that you work to the highest of your production values that you can do as a solo creator, solo shooter. So YouTube for me became a changing mechanism, because what that allowed me to do was then seek micro funding, 10,000, 5,000. The biggest micro funding that I've got to make a film on my own channel was $20,000 for a project I did in Iceland. That was for my YouTube. And with those kind of budgets, when you're working by yourself, actually isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Really, if you did 3 or 4 of those a year, that's okay. That's okay. As just one revenue stream. What it allowed me to do was basically come up with my own ideas, pursue it, and do it for me, myself, and I, and have complete editorial control and complete freedom of the narrative. Because these micro funders, they don't have editorial control. If they want editorial control, fine, then they'll pay more editorial control prices.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's their film.
Right.
But no, these are my films.
So it's more like a collaboration, basically, than it is that you're just doing an assignment.
Soft collaboration. Yeah,
right?
Soft collaboration.
That gets me from you in terms of like you're showing a particular area.
And here's the funny thing, and you'll know this, Patrick, because I asked you for help. Up until COVID, I'd never edited anything in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Anything. Why would I? Right? I was a jobbing freelance cameraman who basically turned up at an airport with a camera and a tape or a card, did my job, gave the tape or the card to the director, and did another job. And that went on for many years. And then I became a director and worked on productions where you had someone called an editor who spent their entire life living in a dark room, pressing buttons. And as a director, why would I need to edit when there's someone that can work a keyboard with their eyes closed? And I would sit there as a director and say, we need that, we need that, we need that. But I wasn't pressing the buttons.
Right.
That was an editor's job. I wasn't doing the sound mix. That was a sound designer or a colorist job for doing the color grade. So I had no physical reason to edit because I'd always worked with budgets. Right? Coming to YouTube, coming to COVID, coming to micro budgets, I don't know how to edit. Ooh, if this YouTube idea is going to work, I better learn. And I asked you about Final Cut, which I'm still using today. And then I went on some additional courses because to be a filmmaker, you constantly have to review your skill set and learn. I spent thousands and thousands of pounds learning from different sources, going on courses for this, that, and the other. And I learned how to edit. And now I would actually call myself an editor, to be honest. Not that I would work as an editor, but I can definitely edit. And I definitely know the techniques. I mean, the techniques were always there, but they were there as a director, not as an editor. And I actually would say that actually with YouTube, I've probably learned more about making films whilst creating content for my YouTube channel than I ever have working for TV channels. Because even on a small crew for, say, a National Geographic documentary, including your office staff, you're talking at least 20 people.
Mm.
Researchers, all this kind of stuff, writers perhaps. Well, I'm trying to create content that is almost on par to what you would see on a broadcast or streaming channel by myself, with a 10,000 euro or dollar pound budget, whatever, versus a 200,000. But actually, with technology that's available today, I mean, we've got three really great, we're shooting on an iPhone 16, with the technology that we have today, you can go out there and create really powerful, meaningful content with very little equipment. All you really need is a microphone, a camera, and a laptop. From a technical point of view, to go out there and create a story. But the most important thing is that you have to focus on that word, and that is story. And so those basic skills that you need as a director are the most essential. The ability to go out there and investigate and to be curious about the world around you and to ask questions and to be able to interact with people are by far the greater skills than any technical skill you can learn with regarding a camera or light or a software program. It's those skills that you need to be as a person that will define you as a filmmaker, not the other way around. People get too hooked up on firmware updates and all these kind of things and apps and all that stuff. Throw that out the window. At the end of the day, it's about interacting with people and pulling out their story that defines you as a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker.
What would you say between YouTube and the traditional broadcast industry is similar or different in terms of your audience?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, obviously with YouTube, you get huge amounts of analytics, right? I mean, I can tell you that most of my viewers is American, which is strange, because obviously I'm British. Obviously language, but yeah, a lot of my stories are UK focused. They're mostly male by far, 30% are female, so 70% are male, and they're mostly my age group, right? But that's because when I go on an adventure, I don't just go, here I am on an adventure. I go, here I am on an adventure, and this particular trail was first trod by this explorer who then went on to found this and create this. There's always a historical element. Mm-hmm. There's always a factual element. So my documentaries are more meaningful in that sense. I'm not just going there for the hell of it. I'm going there to tell a story, and that means research. So, for example, Friday I'm off to Norway, and I've got, again, micro funding from, bit of plug here, by a company called RAB. They're a British clothing brand, and they put some funding into this production. And I'm going to be shooting 2 stories side by side. The primary reason why I'm going is because there are 2 Dutch wheelchair Paralympic athletes who have won gold at various Olympics. And they're going to cross in their wheelchairs the highest, most frozen plateau in Europe called Hardangervidda, right? And they're going to push themselves in their chairs with poles.
Wow.
Right? And I'm making a film about their life, right? And while I'm there, I'm also going to shoot an entirely separate film about a sabotage attempt that happened in the Second World War. And Hollywood made a film called The Heroes of Telemark, okay, with Kirk Douglas. I think it was in the 60s.
Right, yeah.
But it's based on a historical saboteur events that basically was there to prevent Hitler from creating the atomic bomb, because there was this factory that was creating something called heavy water, and Hitler needed this heavy water. And if he'd have got it before the Americans developed the atomic bomb, history would have been rewritten, obviously. Anyway, so I'm going to go there and I'm going to make this film about the wheelchair athletes. And then while I'm there, 2 different cameras, literally, I'm going to be making film about this Telemark, Heroes of Telemark type story. So that in itself is a history documentary. And that is driving a lot of the demographics on my channel, because I'm going there to recreate a historical event. And I'm going to be doing that with drama reconstruction.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm going to be doing that by interviewing a lot of experts, historians and military experts after the film is done.
So you're basically making 2 types of documentaries. You're making a sort of traditional documentary, I suppose, so people think about in terms of like reconstruction and showing locations, etc., and telling a story about an event.
Yeah.
And then you're also going to follow 2 persons going through an actual event live,
Yep.
in a sense that you're going to
Yep.
follow them and see how they accomplish their journey.
Yeah.
Where are you going to be at all in the frame itself in any of the documentaries, or are you going to be presenting, or
Good
or
question.
stay behind the
Yeah.
camera?
So the story about the wheelchair athletes, no, that's purely observational documentary.
Okay.
And I will film everything that is here and now in the timeline that they're in Norway. And then I'm going to shoot a whole bunch of interviews after and glue it together that way about how they became disabled. Well, they're not disabled. How they became, how they lost the ability to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The story about the German sabotage or the Norwegian sabotage, about the story about Hitler and his atomic bomb, will be I can never say that word.
Participatory.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will be me talking to camera. Will be me on this frozen plateau in the snow and ice going, can you imagine what it was like for these 4 soldiers that were out there to sabotage this industrial plant? That if Hitler had got this heavy water, he would have created the atomic bomb. So that film will be me talking about it.
Okay.
And so I've written a script and I've hit some beats. And I've got a script and I've written my beats in my script, and those beats I'm going to be delivering to camera, and the rest of it I'll capture in interviews with experts thereafter.
And will both be micro budgets? In a sense?
Well, yeah. The whole thing is a micro budget,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole thing is basically, again, the budget I was given was to tell the story of these 2 wheelchair athletes.
Right.
But Kevin thought, well, I'm in exactly the same place, almost following the exactly same route that happened in the Second World War. It would be foolish of me not to turn the camera on myself when I can and use the same B-roll for both documentaries and create an entirely different film.
Right. I see.
Because I've only got to do a few pieces to camera, a few vlogs, and I've got the skeleton of my story,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of it I'll do with interviews when I get back home. All the
Right.
historical facts.
Yeah. And this will be placed on YouTube, both these productions?
Yeah.
And is YouTube, in terms of earning revenue, is it something that you're already seeing profits from, or?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously my channel is monetized, and I do make some money from YouTube, but obviously, at the moment that's not enough to then warrant going to Norway for 2 weeks
Right.
nearly. The cost of that would be prohibitive. I mean, I just went to Kilimanjaro a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go to Kilimanjaro. That was $5,000 to do that trip, but I got the budget to go and do that trip. So my strategy with YouTube is, again, to use my experience as a producer to work with brands, organizations, companies, whoever they might be, to get them to put just enough on the table.
Mm-hmm.
If you're asking under 10,000 euros, that level of money can be signed off quite easily. But if you're asking sort of, the 50,000, plus, that's going to be signed off at almost CEO level.
Right.
Depending on the size of the company, of course, or certainly head of a department, So those kind of higher level budgets have got to be signed off at the top, but the micro budgets don't. They could be the marketing person go, okay, 10,000 isn't going to break our company. So
Right.
let's go for that.
So basically, YouTube has given you the closest you've ever wanted to be in terms of an adventure filmmaker, because
Yeah.
you're really just doing it by yourself for the most part, right?
Yeah.
You're a crew of one
Crew of one.
nowadays.
Yeah.
So you're really now where you probably wanted to be when you first thought about combining filmmaking with
Yeah.
adventuring and exploring.
Yeah. My only regret, especially in the last 10, 15 years, was that I didn't do YouTube earlier. That's my
When
only
did
regret.
YouTube start? That was back 2006.
2006, something like that. So it's not a
Right.
new thing
No,
at all. It's
no.
not some kind of new, it's
But
been
when it-
around for 20 odd years.
But when it started, it probably didn't have that type of audience
No.
yet, or
And let's be honest, there's a lot of rubbish on it.
yeah, and,
Right.
and I don't think it was monetized then either
No.
yet. So you couldn't
there's
make
a lot
money
of
from it. Yeah,
And there's a lot of stuff that's obviously ripped, people sort of
yeah,
putting stuff on YouTube that isn't theirs.
right.
Now, as a filmmaker, that's not for me. What I want to do is try to create my own original content, and just be happy with myself that that's the best that I can do with the amount of time that I can spend on it.
Mhm.
And to just do the production from A to Z and go, you know what? It's not perfect, but for a one-man gig, that's not bad.
Yeah,
And there's only so many times you can watch your own edit
yeah, that's right.
without going
Right.
completely crazy. You do need, that's one reason why in broadcast there are so many executive producers, etc., because they can all come in and they can all watch and edit with fresh eyes. I can't. I have to watch it. I output it, I watch it on my phone, I watch it on my telly. I watch
guess-
it on a laptop, and then I think, is this good enough? I'll post it.
Yeah, and I guess the feedback you get feedback from your audience, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Direct feedback from your work,
Yeah.
and where you can kind of start thinking like, okay, they're okay with this standard. I don't need to polish it more because
And again, if we take my Kilimanjaro film that I just recently did for my channel, most people would only watch that because they are curious about Kilimanjaro. They are not expecting the production values that I might deliver, because most films of that nature are just people literally filming themselves on their phone
Right.
or a GoPro the entire time. There is no process about actually telling a story. So I hope that when someone watches something, they're getting something extra. But in essence, the only reason why they're watching it is because they're curious about that one subject,
Right.
not because they just want to watch, a documentary.
Yeah, because if I look at my habits watching YouTube, I might look at several people's videos of the same subject,
Yeah,
and they'll be all from varying qualities,
yeah,
right? Some might be more, you can tell it had a lot more production value, a lot more money involved. But sometimes you just don't mind watching somebody who just happened to have gone there and they're just vlogging and talking about something, but they might point something out that is just interesting.
yeah,
Like talking to your friend about
Yeah.
their trip that they went to someplace, or
Yeah.
or food they tried that they really liked.
exactly. Yeah,
So the audience, I think, is a lot more. They have less expectation of big budget productions on YouTube.
they're not
right?
expecting it. Most YouTubers don't come from a professionher background per se.
They come from from their bedrooms or their basements and their garages.
Again, the biggest driver of the biggest differential, I would say, between amateur and professional is storytelling. What is my story? And to be thinking about that long before you've taken one step on the location you're
Right.
at. What is my take from this?
So before you even think about equipment and such, it's a story.
Story is king. There isn't There isn't, equipment and all of that is just a byproduct of capturing a moment in time.
Right. And you'll be giving workshops for a program that we're starting in spring and summer
Yeah.
called the NDT Documentary Impact Challenge. You'll be one of our head teachers giving lectures about documentary filmmaking. Can you talk about what your aims are for sharing your knowledge and your expertise to participants who might be joining the course?
I think my aim is just for people to just go out there and do it. I think that when I started, the process of making film was very restrictive, because not so much with the cameras, but more with the editing. Okay, we're talking editing tape to tape, VHS to VHS, or cutting film, right? Whereas nowadays, you don't need an awful lot of stuff. You could literally shoot and edit a film on your phone if you wanted to. And the results can be quite good if your story's good. So I would say my biggest take to people considering a career, or even just for the fun of it, in film, is that you can just go out there and do it. And there aren't restraints and limitations. And the other thing that I would say, and I've spoken to quite a few sort of people, perhaps sort of in their late teens, early 20s, is that this is an industry. And that sometimes parents can sometimes think, well, this isn't a job. Yeah. A job is a 9-to-5 career, that it's something that is tangible, that you can touch. Filmmaking, in whatever way you look at it, is a job. It is a profession. And it's a profession that I've been doing pretty much. I first started making money, Patrick, filming bar mitzvahs. And I'm not Jewish, right? But I got asked to film bar mitzvahs in North London when I was 16. And so I've been making money from this industry since I was 16. And anyone that considers to further their knowledge in filmmaking, whether it's with our course with MDT or whether or not it's just learning stuff online, if you're a curious person, this industry, and I use this word industry in the broadest possible terms, is the greatest mechanism to achieve your curiosity, because it will take you to places and it will let you meet people that you would never, ever, ever have met in normal day-to-day life. And I think that's the biggest take that someone can bring from learning this craft, is it will literally open your doors.
And we're also hoping to show one of your films that you've made in the past.
Yeah.
So people can get to see what you've done traveling and making a documentary about we don't know which film yet. You're still thinking about which film you can show to the public.
Well, I know.
You know which one you already want? All right. Well, we'll let you guys know if you come to our website and have a look. We'll inform you when that film will be shown and what the subject will be. But I'm sure it's going to be one full of adventure and excitement and a very interesting subject, because it sounds like you really pick unique topics, unique subjects to film. And I think that can be very even subjects that you might think that seems like regular, but behind it probably there's a lot more to it. I think that's what's interesting about documentary filmmaking, right?
Yeah, and I think that there was two productions in my life that kind of stood out in a juxtaposed position, right? So ones that really were miles apart, right? One was a freelance gig, and one was under my production company, New Earth Films. So I got asked as a freelance cameraman to go and do a shoot for a production company called Off the Fence, which is actually based in Amsterdam, to make a 1 hour episode for National Geographic about Lego, right? So I went to Denmark and spent nearly a month in Denmark and the Czech Republic filming Lego bricks, right? I love Lego, right? So it was a great gig. And the next day when I got back, I went on my own New Earth Films production, which was also for National Geographic, ironically. So on one day I'm working as a freelance cameraman. On the next day I'm working as an executive producer, director, cameraman.
Right.
And that gig was about children with HIV in West Africa.
Wow.
So I'd gone from filming Lego bricks to filming dying children with HIV,
Right.
within 36 hours. And I think there's very few jobs in the world where you can have that contrast
Right.
in life.
Yeah.
And that was definitely one of them where I sort of, it was almost like a sort of, am I awake here? Because these worlds are completely apart.
Right.
And I think that was quite a eureka moment for me.
Have you done productions where especially like the one you just talked about, very heavy subjects like that, where you needed some downtime from filmmaking, that you came back home and not that it broke you because you're still in the industry, of course, you're still working, but that you kind of felt like, ooh, this is it's getting to me in a way.
No. I mean, I've done a lot of work for UNICEF actually as a filmmaker, and so because of that, I filmed malaria, HIV, child slavery, all those kind of subjects, and obviously that they can be quite upsetting. But the ones that get me the most is I've made a lot of films about animal welfare. Where animals are used for entertainment, where animals are used for medicine or for the fur industry and things like that. And it's those films that affect me the most because an animal in that need is utterly, utterly helpless. A bear that is being a bear that is being used to harvest its bear bile inside its gallbladder for Chinese medicine, where they basically stick a tube in and drain its stomach in a cage, can't do anything about its life. And so those subjects are the ones that affect me most as a filmmaker. But what I do say is that as a filmmaker, and I'm not a journalist at all, it's our duty to turn the camera on uncomfortable stories. And I have definitely filmed some uncomfortable stories. But I think it's my duty to do that where possible.
Wow. That should be very interesting for, I think, people who are gonna take your course, and where you get a chance to, of course, talk about the basics of documentary filmmaking, right? Camera work, how to conduct interviews and such. But also you want to talk a lot about the behind the scenes in terms of like how to approach filmmaking as a person, about the storytelling, about the preparation, about the adventures that you will be experiencing and how to deal with it, right? You'll be using some of your hostile environment training as well, right? Offering some information about that. I myself had experiences in Amsterdam. Unexpected. I was in a film production as a producer, and we were filming a couple of kids walking in a neighborhood. Turns out part of the neighborhood was controlled by some gangs. and we were approached and threatened,
Yeah.
and we were told to stop filming or
Yeah.
else. And that was so unexpected because, of course, in the Netherlands, you think every place is safe, and even Amsterdam, of course, some dodgy places, but you think, it's
Relatively,
just,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not Panama City or so,
Mhm.
and and yeah, it's we're not prepared for that.
Mm.
You react in a way that can put you into more trouble.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was approached, and generally I'm a calm person, but I got angry. And I wanted to confront the people in a way that might have been more dangerous and might have escalated the problem, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
how dare you stop me from filming? I have rights to film it. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
But obviously, that luckily that didn't happen. I was able to calm down and talk to the people, right? I realized in the back of my mind, this is not going the right direction. I shouldn't do this. And we de-escalated the issue, right? It was
Yeah.
myself and I think the cinematographer spoke to them and such. And we were still allowed to film,
Yeah.
but we were just told, don't point your camera to these buildings,
All right.
right? You can point this direction. So we were able to solve the problem. But yeah, it was a situation where if you're not expecting it,
Mm.
you just might make the wrong move, and that wrong decision, the wrong thing that you might say, or the wrong look you might give, can mean some big problems.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's unfortunate. Some people have lost their lives, maybe being in a situation they weren't prepared for.
Because filmmakers are not tourists. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
when I say to people on my course, everyone's on traveling, but that's generally on holiday or business.
Yeah.
And tourists don't go off into little villages where children are dying of HIV
Yeah.
and go and talk to the mother. That's not a holiday. And that's the difference with filmmaking is that you just go into a whole array of different places and different situations.
Because you have a mission. You have a mission
Yeah.
to capture something that is going to help tell a story and
Yeah.
is hopefully authentic.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been on holidays as well where you're not allowed to leave the hotel, right? They have a fence around the hotel and they say, stay within these borders, enjoy all our free food, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Those kind of
And
vacations.
I think just to conclude, I think definitely from my point of view, my USP, my unique selling point is that my career is almost back to front.
Mhm.
Because most people might start on YouTube and then they might go and
Progress.
end up doing stuff for sort of professional streamers and channels.
Right.
But with me, it's complete opposite. That I've played with the big boys, but actually I enjoy it far more creating the content that I do, but also having the technical knowledge and the storytelling ability to deliver it. And I think that is quite unusual.
And so what you're saying is important is training is still important, or getting some knowledge and being prepared, understanding how to tell a story, how to use equipment, and how to talk to your subject, and to do research. So all those kind of things are still very important to making good productions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've gained that from going to school, from working with the big productions and such, that now you can do it on your own comfortably. And yeah, that's great. That's yeah, I don't know what else to say, but as a filmmaker, you've got the best of both worlds. I mean, one of the things that I really like about filmmaking is the opportunity to travel. That's one reason why I'd like to get into the business, is to travel and see the world. And you managed to do that, and you've gone to places that I would not dare myself go and try to make a movie.
It's 136 countries, and yes, I have a list.
136 countries. Have you been to Antarctica yet? Is that so all continents you've covered?
All continents.
All continents you've covered.
Yeah.
You've got that off your bucket list.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's just those micro dot islands that
It's the little islands. It's the little islands I'm ticking off.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming and talking about your your background and your experiences in filmmaking. I encourage you to join Kevin's course. Please visit our website, learnfilmmaking.nl, to register. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you there, and
Yeah,
hopefully
we'll
you'll
see
meet
you there.
Kevin.
Yeah.
And yeah, nice to talk.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
You're welcome.